What is up? You were watching another episode of the College Lacrosse Weekend Recap. And before I get into all the games, I wanted to say be sure to like and subscribe. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. And if you wanted to support us beyond that, you could also go to the website, LaxFactor.com, and buy yourself a t-shirt. Ton of games to get to, though. We've got Penn State facing off against Maryland, and there was a big lead had and a lead lost, but a game won. We had Yale and Penn going into 3 overtimes. We had Syracuse and Notre Dame doing all sorts of weird things. So, ton of great games to talk about. Let's not waste any time. Let's get into it. All right, so first we have number 1 Penn State playing number 3 Maryland at Maryland. So this game did not go down at all how I expected. I expected it to be a battle. I figured it could end up being a 3-5 goal decision either way, and I admitted that it could have been Maryland winning it or it could have been Penn State winning it by that margin. What I did not expect was for Penn State to jump out to an 8-1 lead by the end of the first quarter, make it look like they're going to rout the crap out of Maryland, and then have Maryland climb back into it, make it respectable. They got within 8-7 at one point before Penn State then jumped out to a 10-7 lead and rolled from there. But a 13-10 final decision in that game in favor of Penn State. That's about what I expected. I just didn't think it was going to go down the way that it did. Jack Kelly played huge for Penn State, 3 goals and a helper. Mac O'Keefe, 2 goals, 2 assists in the game. So the usual suspects for Penn State all played. Grant Ament played. He was quiet with just 2 assists on the day. He looked a little bit hobbled, but I think he's probably healthy, and I think that the way he looked throughout the game, he at one point limped off the field, had to be helped off the field to a degree, but ended up coming back and looking okay, albeit hobbled. So I suspect right now for him, a lot of people were worried, did they bring him back too early? I don't think that's what it was. I think it's probably at this point a pain management situation. If they have him back, he's probably not at risk of getting re-injured badly. I don't think they're going to bring him back in a rush while they're sitting as the number 1 team in the country, not in much danger. So I feel like he's probably going to be okay, but O'Keefe looked crazy. The one thing about Penn State, because I hadn't seen them play a lot yet, was they are fast. They play fast. They are actually physically really, really fast. So it seems like the type of athletes that Tambroni's always recruited, super, like he made a killing on smaller guys at Cornell that were quick and excellent dodgers. And it looks like he's doing that at Penn State, and it's finally starting to pan out because the quickness is starting to gel with the ability and the stick skills. It was ridiculous how tight Ament's cradle is, just in terms of his stick control. It's next level stuff. It's Lyle Thompson level stuff in terms of how he's able to function in traffic while protecting his stick, while keeping his head up, getting ready to feed. So he has a very Jeff Teat-like feel, but he's a different player. He's quicker than Teat, and he's a little bit more I'm going to feed first than Teat is, but very similar players, and both of them ridiculously good. So that was good to see him get back on the field and play well. But in the end, hell of a game. 13-10 Penn State decision. Penn State, the undisputed now number 1 team in the country. The first time we've had this happen so far this year where the number 1 team didn't just get dumped pretty quickly after. So hats off to them. Great game. We move on to the next one. Equally as crazy of a game was number 2 Yale and number 13 Penn. Yale coming into town to play Penn at Penn, and 13-12 in 3 overtimes. It took them 3 overtimes to decide the outcome in this one. Sam Handley, he scores 2 goals and 3 assists on the day, including the game winner in overtime, which was a snipe on a dodge down the left alley. So Handley looked incredible all day long. The big thing about Penn here in picking up this win is they're extremely tough. So they've played Yale and now to a victory. They've played Cornell now to a victory. This is their Ivy League to win at this point, but they've played a brutal schedule early on in the season, and it has proven to pay off here as now they just rattled win after win after win together, all against quality opponents. So Reed Junkin, he ends up with 22 saves on the day, so that was huge in this victory. But the bigger note here was not even Junkin coming up with a ridiculous game, because 22 saves is ridiculous by any measure. Kyle Gallagher going 14 of 29 against TD Erlin. So that was huge, because if Kyle Gallagher doesn't do that, and if TD Erlin has his way against Penn like he has with every other team they played this year, Penn loses that game by 5 goals. There's no way they pull this out. So you throw Gallagher's huge day together, you throw all of their Offensive players gelling in a way, not turning the ball over a ridiculous amount of times against a very capable Yale defense. But, between Junkins' 22 saves and Gallagher playing very well and holding his own against T.D. Erlin, there's the Penn win. Penn is a very dangerous team coming out of the Ivy. And that's it. We get to the next one. We've got Duke. Number 5, Duke playing unranked North Carolina. Carolina started out really hot, and despite their solid record, they end up unranked coming into this week. So Duke travels down there to play them, and Carolina pulls out a 10-8 win. And 2 straight weeks now. Duke started out hot. They looked like they were the best team in the country, racking up a bunch of wins after they had that loss to High Point early on. And now last 2 weeks, Duke has lost. They lose to Syracuse after having a big lead early and offensively just couldn't keep it going. Now they lose to North Carolina on the road, both games on the road, by the way. They lose to North Carolina 10-8 now. Same thing. Their offense is anemic. They're just having a hard time playing against teams that can cover them man to man, and their midfielders are not developing as they need to be. They're not getting separation anymore like they were early in the season, and their attackmen are just not a good group of dodgers. You got Manown, Smith, and Robertson, none of them known for their dodging prowess and abilities, so I think that hurts Duke. I think they'll figure it out, though, but right now they're a team that has to kind of refigure out their identity again. Gutterding was that Dodger for them all year last year. He was the guy that created when they needed it, and they just don't have a guy that's able to consistently do that and do that at a level where it's okay for him to carry and dominate the ball a little bit more and not turn it over and not have it affect them in a negative way. So hell of a game there. UNC gets a huge win. Johnson for UNC, the goalie, he ends up with 21 saves, so let's not pretend like that didn't factor into this. He played crazy. But Duke, I always hate saying this when a goalie has a crazy game, but Duke struggled with shot selection, I feel, a little bit in this game. Their finishers normally against Syracuse leading into that game, I had said one of the things that Duke does amazingly well is finish. And in that Syracuse game and in this game, let's say in the second half of that Syracuse game and in most of this game, they had a hard time finishing. Maybe it's just because Johnson stood on his head, but I think part of that was shot selection. They just don't have the time and room, hands-free, like everything is semi-contested because no one's getting so much separation that they just have wide open shots left and right. Teams are able to adjust to them early, and once a team settles in against Duke, they can typically defend them a lot more effectively than they do early on as they're trying to figure out that flow. Another crazy game this weekend, number 8 Syracuse traveling to number 12 Notre Dame. Cuse plays their first road game of the season, which is hard to believe at this point, and Notre Dame jumped up, kind of like the Maryland Penn State game. Notre Dame jumps up to an 11-2 lead at one point in the first half. Cuse ends up going on their own run over I believe they scored a goal or two by the end of the second quarter and then carried that into the third quarter. Cuse goes on their own run. So 11-2 at one point, Notre Dame. I was sitting there crapping my pants, sad, and then all of a sudden it's 11-9 with, I believe it was 8 to 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and I'm like, giddy up, baby. And then Notre Dame scores 2 back-to-back goals, and they finish it off. Costabile played crazy, 5 goals on the day. Cuse had a hard time, especially early on. He abused the Cuse long stick midfielders. He abused Kennedy twice, I believe, at the early in the game. I think his 2 early goals were against Kennedy. So that was pretty crazy. Brendan Gleason proved that he is the dodging leader of this team, the anchor of this offense. He goes for 3 goals and a helper. And what are you going to do? I mean, it's Jamie Trimboli and Brad Voigt each go for 3 goals. Trimboli had a dish mixed in there, but Syracuse, they don't lack talent, that's for sure. A lot of people were slamming them for the quality of their roster and recruiting woes and all this. They don't lack talent. What they lack is motivation. They are able to come back and make all of these games interesting, but as was the case with their loss to Colgate, their loss here to Notre Dame, they come out flat, and it requires a comeback and late game heroics to get them in gear. And we saw this a little bit last year too. I think that's just a problem with they don't have, and no one's proven to be the guy yet. So what happens is the situation dictates who the guy is going to be, and they thrive in that desperation, I think, because it forces everybody to try to be the guy. So I think Syracuse, they just got to figure out how to play a full game, and they'll be okay, but they're scary too. The Notre Dame proved they're legit, and they earned their rise in the rankings. Syracuse didn't. I mean, this is no knock against them. They were sitting at number 8 coming in. I haven't seen the new rankings yet because I've been working all morning, but Syracuse is solid too. Nobody wants to play either of these teams. The ACC overall is proving to be tough. The Big Ten, I mean, these are the 2 power conferences in NCAA lacrosse, the ACC and the Big Ten, and it has proven totally true and accurate. Another one I just wanted to mention was High Point. Number 14, High Point, hosting Furman. They get a big win, 17-10. Nolting, 3 goals, 3 assists. This kid can play lacrosse. Chris Young, 5 goals. He's also been huge for High Point through this whole thing. Tim Troutner Jr. back on the path of righteousness with 14 saves versus just 10 goals against. So he had an excellent game. At 8-2 now, these guys are looking dangerous. They started out hot. They get a couple of upset wins, and then they lose a couple, and teams are like, oh, maybe they're not legit. But, no one's looking forward to playing High Point at this point. They are a legit team, and they have a fairly easy schedule to finish off here. So sitting at 8-2 now, they're hot to make the tournament and to get a chance to try to get themselves into the quarters and into the semis. So High Point playing great lacrosse. They have 3 really key guys, Nolting, Young, and Troutner, that are all playing at a really high level, and they're not the only ones. They go deep beyond that, especially on the offensive side. So it'll be interesting to see how they finish off and how they do in their own conference tournament. Another one, another team that's been struggling here is Towson. Towson had won their first 5 games with wins over Hopkins and Loyola. Then they dropped 3 in a row, but they dropped them to Cornell, Duke, and Denver. So no crime there. This win gets them back on the track. They beat 5 and 5 Fairfield last week, and then they have Hofstra, who's a solid team and is capable of beating teams on a good day. Now, though, they got to face 7-3 UMass and 8-2 Delaware still. So they still have 2 really tough teams on their schedule, but they're winnable games for Towson as long as they can put it together like they have leading into this. Maloof and McLean, they each went for 3 goals in the win over Hofstra. 10-9. They got a lead early, and Hofstra kind of battled back, and they held them off late. Canto was benched after giving up 6 goals to only 2 saves. And they brought in Shane Brennan, and he played solid in relief. So I would suspect you'll see Canto get the start again. I think this was probably a let's get the kid out of there as he's struggling, but we'll see how that plays out. Ryan Tierney looked strong for Hofstra, 4 goals in the loss. So no crime there, or no shame for Hofstra losing this one. Towson needed this win. It doesn't matter that it was only a 1-goal win over Hofstra. A win is a win is a win. And moving forward, they just have to keep that going. Towson just has to play tough against Delaware and UMass, and they should be okay. Then we go to Princeton. I had picked Princeton to be one of the top teams in the Ivy because offensively they're loaded, and they're having a hard time. Brown came to town, gets the 14-10 win over Princeton. Phil Goss in the game, 16 saves for Brown, so that was huge. Darian Cook, 2 goals, 3 assists, and Luke McCaleb, 4 goals and a helper. Michael Sowers held in check, 1 goal and 2 dishes in this game, so that's been key. You keep Michael Sowers quiet, you can keep the Princeton offense quiet, but 14-10, Princeton is struggling, and that kind of pretty much seals their fate at this point. And Brown getting another win, so keeping themselves in the hunt for the Ivy with Yale and Cornell, and they've got some big wins for themselves. So Brown is a really solid team as well. And then we get into the rest of them here. I didn't even have this up, so let me bring up the Inside Lacrosse scoreboard. Inside Lacrosse scoreboard is awesome, and it's what I use for most things. I use the websites from the team specifically for stats and things like that now. Ohio State and Rutgers. I didn't even have that in my notes, but Ohio State coming in undefeated. Everyone's like, oh, Ohio State, they should be number 1 or number 2. I think they came into this game number 4, and come on. They get exposed by Rutgers, and that's not a knock against Rutgers. Rutgers is a legitimate team, and they played a tough schedule. But what everyone says every year with Ohio State is, yes, they're 5-0, 6-0, 6-1, 7-1, whatever they always start the season out as. And in the past, there's been similar gripes about Penn State and their schedule. Not this year, though. But Ohio State just gets roasted by Rutgers. Ohio State had no answer offensively whatsoever. Ohio State's a team that really... They snipe a lot from outside, and Rutgers, as they slid and even where help was drawn, they were going 3 slides deep, covering their backside help well. They didn't give Ohio State those snipes that they would normally give them. Max Edelman, he also had a heck of a game for Rutgers in the win. So in the end, Rutgers, great job. They're a great lacrosse team. Ohio State, they could still be okay. They've still got a bunch of Big Ten games to play and a couple of chances to get quality wins, but this did not look good for them, and it really just held up all of our arguments where we're all saying, hey, Ohio State, probably 4 for them is not really an accurate ranking despite their record because they just hadn't played anybody yet. And then you give them the first team, they play of some real quality that had really been tested in Rutgers, and they put it on them. So good job, Rutgers, in that one. Virginia roasts Utah. Nothing to see here. They go up early. I think they had a 9-0 lead at one point. I was kind of hoping Utah would come to town and would hang in Charlottesville at Klockner. Did not happen. Virginia handled them as expected. Virginia's playing really tough lacrosse right now as well. Let's see, what other games do we want to talk about, if any? Army, they get the big win over Bucknell, 15-13. Colgate got beat up by Loyola, at Loyola. 21-7. Spencer, I believe, had a 10-point game in that one. Pat Spencer just proven he deserves to be the man. I think that boosts. I think his points per game was already at 7 and change, so that's going to boost that a little bit. And their schedule finishing up looks similar. I mean, they're not going to have a rough time here down the stretch. They've got Lehigh, Georgetown, Boston University, Army, and Lafayette. So, I mean, Georgetown's capable. Lehigh is. Boston U is. Army. So that's 4 games here. So Loyola, all 4 of their next games are winnable. But those 4 games that they have against Lehigh, Georgetown, Boston U, and Army, they will not win all 4 of them. I predict one of those teams is going to knock them off because they're all 4 very tough teams. I'm just surprised that, Colgate's not terrible, and I'm surprised to see Loyola roach them as badly as they did. Colgate did this last year, I believe, though. I believe they started out hot and finished poorly, and they may be just pulling that again, is all. What else we have here? Villanova beats Marquette 15-11. Denver, key win over Georgetown. Georgetown's been tough, and they're one of those teams that I kept saying, hey, we're going to keep talking about them until they lose. So Denver takes Georgetown down 16-9 at home. So that's a really big win, and that's telling within the Big East Conference. Air Force beats up on Jacksonville. So that was a good one. We already talked about Duke and Hopkins and Michigan. Duh. Hopkins and Michigan, they play. Hopkins handled their business. Joey Epstein looks great again. Kyle Marr had a couple of nasty sticks. Darby looked tough in cage. So Hopkins continuing to just battle through their struggles and get key wins where they need to. So that was an excellent game as well. Albany beats Hartford, and this is the return of Nanakoke, as Nanakoke had himself an excellent game. I believe he scored 5 goals and a helper, so that's excellent. Nanakoke's been struggling to find an identity. Albany gets back to 4-5, and now I'm rambling. The only other thing that I wanted to take a look at was during the week this week, we've got really nothing in terms of games, weekday games, but what we do have is tomorrow night, Cuse at Hobart, which is going to be a big one. Hobart has played some really tough lacrosse. They're filling it up offensively. They're struggling defensively, though. Syracuse is strong on both sides. So, I mean, definitely Syracuse should win this game, but they have gone into Hobart and struggled before. It's a long-standing rivalry. These teams have been playing each other for 50, 60, 70 years. They have the Krause-Simmons trophy that gets doled out to this. So this is a rivalry that Hobart's feeling really good coming into this game. They feel like they have a legitimate shot at beating Syracuse at their place, and it's legit. They do have a shot at beating Syracuse, especially after Syracuse coming off of a rough loss on the road, and now they're going to play their second road game outside once again in the cold weather of Hobart, although I think tomorrow's supposed to be pretty decent up in Geneva. So that's the big game this week. But hey, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. You can go to LaxFactor.com, buy a t-shirt. We have this t-shirt and a bunch of others there as well. And thanks for watching.